My name is Leanne Barber, owner and movement creator at Two Hearts Dance and Yoga. We are here to bring you some inspiration during this time, and what better way to do it than with some of the people who have inspired me through my entire life. So today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Gesel Mason. Gesel was one of my modern dance professors at the University of Maryland, and she has been an inspiration to me for many years, influencing me as the dancer I am today. Gesel is a choreographer, performer, educator, and arts facilitator. She is the artistic director for Gesel Mason Performance Projects and the associate professor of dance at the University of Texas in Austin. Gesel was a company member of Liz Lerman Dance Exchange and Ralph Lemon Cross Performance Projects. For over 20 years, Gesel has been committed to supporting and celebrating the contributions of African American artists and communities. Her solo performance project, No Boundaries, Dancing the Visions of Contemporary Black Choreographers, was highlighted on NPR, Google Arts and Culture, and in Dance Teacher magazine, and is evolving into a digital humanities archive to illuminate the unique legacies and aesthetics of those choreographers. Gesel's dance work utilizes dance, theater, humor, and storytelling to bring visibility to voices unheard, situations neglected, or perspectives considered taboo. Thank you so much for being here, Gesel. It's so nice to see you and sit down with you today.
So nice to see you as well. It's been a minute. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, thank you for just being here, and it's great to see all the things you're doing. Just before we get into things, with everything that's going on today, with the change in times right now, how has your dancing and teaching been impacted?
Teaching at the university, one of the things that happened was the last day, we knew that we were probably going to have to go to online learning for the remaining classes. But we were hoping, we were like Friday. So we were all trying to wrap up before we had to go to online learning. And we were like, well, we have one more day, we have Friday. And then the president got COVID-19 and they were like, everything's shut down, it's shut down. Abort. And it was really interesting. I feel like a lot of educators went through this, anybody who had to go to online, as well as the students. We were in triage mode at that point, but I feel very lucky to be at UT Austin, where the dance program, like we have an MFA in dance and social justice, and that is the feeling of the entire program, like is attention to social justice. And, people ask often, well, what does that mean in dance? And a lot of times it's just thinking about the ways whatever spaces you show up in as a dancer, how are you aware of who has privilege and who doesn't? How can you have agency? How can you still use your voice? So, and how does that connect to your dancing self? So that doesn't have to be separate, right? Like for example, you're in these spaces, but to be able to think about and look at the spaces you're in and think about, how do I reach every single person in this room, right? These are the kind of issues that we want our dance artists to think about. And we talk about them as artist citizens. So when we shifted into the online digital world, I felt like we were prepared in one way, just because we're like, dancing is more than just getting the steps correctly, right? Because then you're just like trying to watch, and you're like, I don't know, like, is that your right hand? Is what, I don't, it was so difficult. Students, we had to think about the fact that we don't go into people's homes. And now all of a sudden we had this safe space that we had crafted in our studios, where everybody shows up. We don't know anything about people's background. It's just, you bring your body and your stories and yourself and your learning, and you get in there and you work hard. Now we're in like people's houses, and some people don't have space, and some people have these big, beautiful, houses. And how was that impacting the learning? So we really had to, what I appreciated was we took a whole week to just be like, to check in and to talk about how we might want to approach this. And in the end, folks came out with some really interesting things, like the ballet teachers. Um, one of our ballet teachers gave the assignment for the students to teach the combination to somebody in their household. Like it could anybody, you know, they had to teach, right? So now you had to, because they wanted them to be able to talk about the terminology and the step and to teach it. Now this is not something we would necessarily do in class, right? We just continue to work on the steps, work on the combination, get that all together. But like one student found out that her mother took ballet and she had no idea. You know, so it was just like, oh, here is yet another way for us to be
Right.
together and connected. So instead of just feeling like, I mean, because it was definitely a shock to the system. Instead of it just being like just sad that we couldn't be together. Some seniors, I mean, they didn't get to have their ceremony. They didn't get to have all the things we would do for our seniors. You know, we have freshmen coming in now. Community is a big part of what we do. Energy is a big part of what we do. So we're talking a lot about how can we continue to have connection and energy even when we might be on Zoom. You know, we're hoping to get back into the studio, but we need to do it safely and responsibly. It's not worth risking lives, you know? So I think that question of what does it mean to be a dancer when you're not in the studio and when you're not on stage? And what is it that we really want to be teaching and sharing with our students? Like we're thinking about that more than just, oh, well, you know, darn, we can't have that show, so we're just going to do this really bad Zoom version of a show. You know, we're really trying to be creative in regards to how we're thinking about teaching and education anyway.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that with us. It's kind of an insight to knowing what it's like, you know, to be at that university level and, you know, how things are being impacted across the board. It's very interesting to learn about. So, you know, as a dancer who has worked professionally in many different realms, you worked with Liz Lerman Dance Exchange and other projects that you have, you know, your own projects as well. Tell us what your journey has been like in the professional world, kind of leading up to your being a professor in college.
You know, what I love about dance is if you ask everybody this question, everybody's trajectory is so different, right? So even if you hear mine and you think, oh my gosh, well, I'm never going to make it, like it's so not true. I know people who started in their 20s. My mom put me in ballet like as a little girl, because that's what you did with little girls who wiggle a lot. Like, so that was me. And my grandmother and my mom both liked to dance, but I stayed with it. And I went to college for it, and I got scholarships, and I had opportunities to study. So I did go to college. I did get my BFA. I then had the opportunity to teach public high school. I got teacher certified when I was in college, and then I went on to teach public high school. And that actually shifted a lot of things for me, because in working with, this was in Minnesota, in working with those students, that's when it also became important to me, this idea of what dance can do and who is it for. So here are all of these young people, and you know, like, it's like sports. You're like, maybe one of them will go on to be a professional dancer, but it's more than just what happens when you get on stage, right? You know, there's so much that we take from our experiences in the classroom, in our training. And so that made me start thinking differently about dance. And I think that set me up to be a member of the Liz Lerman Dance Exchange. And for folks who don't know, Liz was based in Washington, D.C. She's now in Arizona as part of an institute out there, the Herberger Institute. But the Dance Exchange still exists in Maryland, and it's an intergenerational dance company. And the youngest is usually like, you know, little, but the actual company members were in their 20s and in their 70s all the way through, with different types of backgrounds in dance. And while I was with her, I went further into that idea of what is dance for? Who is it for? Why does it happen? Where is it happening? And we made dances in shipyards, in, on stages. So we were everywhere. So after that, I was like, I can teach anybody, anything, anywhere, anytime. But there was still a part of me, like I had been trained as a repertory dancer. I went to a performing arts high school. And I feel very fortunate to have had that experience, to get really solid training in high school in both. I started out in ballet, and in high school started my modern training, as well as a bunch of, composition and all of those things. And I wanted to, I was trained as a repertory dancer, so I still wanted to do some of my own. I still wanted to work with a lot of different people. So I'd worked with Liz, but I was still interested in working with other choreographers. So I had started in DC. I started my own company, Mason Rhines Productions, a production company. And initially it was created to support my work, but then I was like, well, other people need the support. So we started supporting other emerging artists of color primarily. And then I was also like, well, this is great. And I was writing grants and I was being an administrator, but I was like, I still want to be dancing. And that's when, and I think I was teaching at University of Maryland around that part. So I had my company, Mason Rhines Productions. I was teaching at University of Maryland on and off. And then this was when I got the opportunity to work with Ralph Lemon. And so I would go up to New York and work with him on projects, and that happened over a few years. I continued to work with Liz as a guest artist. And then I really started developing my own stuff, including the solo project, which features the work of 10 different choreographers over a 15-year span. It just kind of kept growing, from Rennie Harris to B.B. Miller to Donald McHale, David Rusev, Robert Battle, who is now the artistic director of Alvin Ailey. All of these people set solos on me. And the idea was always to share with folks the range of work that was created by African-American choreographers. And as a soloist, maybe you can't afford to have Rennie Harris's company, or Jowley or Urban Bushwomen's company come, but maybe you can't afford one soloist. So I designed it so that I could get these artists out and in maybe smaller venues and maybe in spaces where you wouldn't necessarily be able to bring a large company. But I was like, but look at all these choreographers. And I wanted you to know them as people. So it was it was, what I would do is like between 5 and 7 solos in one evening. And in between, I would have videos, interviews with each of the choreographers so that people could get to know who they were. And, you were talking about like the trajectory. I was teaching in public high school. And it was kind of like, sometimes you're told like, you should fall back. You should have a fallback, you should. So I was like, I'll get teacher certified. And I ended up teaching. And then teaching ended up getting me into the dance exchange. And then the dance exchange helped me make my own company. And then my own company became the thing where I got to learn with more choreographers, and I made the No Boundaries project. And then the university system, like then I went and I got my master's at Colorado, actually. And like, here I am. Like there was never in my sort of training, I was like, I want to be a professor in a college. Like that never showed up, but it's been an amazing journey in that way. And I love teaching, and I love that at the college level, you're able, the expectation is that you will continue your research, which is the creative work that we do, making work, getting it out there, having it be seen, or even like as a dancer or as a choreographer, or in this case, my No Boundaries project that I've made. All of this is still of value to the university. So to be able to do that idea of doing what you love, like I've been very fortunate to be able to do that my entire career.
And that's amazing to hear. You were a tough professor. And I will say that with all the love in the world, because it literally made me push to be a better dancer. But, at that college level, it's just, amazing to see that, you know, you were doing that and then also making the way for your own projects and bringing all of those choreographers together. I remember when you had kind of released that no boundaries idea,
Mm-hmm.
putting it out there, and how just wonderful it was to see the collaboration between the artists and you know, what you were creating. So thank you for inspiring me first and foremost, but it's just amazing to see how that journey has brought you to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
Really dedicated a lot of your choreographic work to highlighting, supporting, telling the stories, and uplifting African Americans. You've been doing this for many, many years with your choreography, and it seems to continue to be even more relevant today. I guess tell us about your creative process and how you bring these topics to stage that are kind of topics that, you know, most people might not speak about on a daily basis, or that people just need to hear about. Tell us kind of that creative process and bringing those things to light.
Yeah. You know, I think I primarily make work around things that I have questions about. Like, I never said, you know, I'm going to make really important work about African American, about Black artists. Like, I never was like, that's because I do a bunch of things, right? You know, from how to watch a modern dance concert and what the hell are they doing on stage, to women's sexuality, to like, I mean, it's, you know, it runs the gamut. But there has always sort of been that thread. But the thread is mostly like, I'm really interested in the ways that we manufacture otherness, the ways that we're like, I'm not that person. I don't act like that. I don't do what they do. I'm different from that, right? To create these hierarchies that make us feel better, these artificial hierarchies that make us feel better about ourselves, right? And you can see that like the country's wrestling with that right now with racism and institutional racism and, well, even masks nowadays. You know, it's just like these ways of people really wanting to have their voice be heard, really wanting to be able to be free in their own skin. And I think that is something that's always been interesting to me. And I'm interested in the places where we do have conversation versus where we're like, meh, don't talk to me. Like, yeah. And so my dances have always been about that. And then that idea of like, I know I'm not the only person that thinks this way. I know I'm not the only person that has this question. And so some dances start from like my solo, No Less Black, which I taught to my students, which blows me away because the solo is 20 years old. And I'm like, how is that possible? And the students are like, oh my gosh, that dance is older than I am. I'm like, shut up. No, I didn't say that. But I was like, this is amazing, but the topic is still relevant. Like, I'm no less Black than blank. I'm no less of a woman because I'm no less queer because you know, like those questions around identity, those questions around connection, those questions around humanity and empathy, like those are the things I'm really interested in talking about. And yes, those ideas that are often considered taboo, like now we are talking about race. Now we are talking about class. Now we are talking about Me Too. Now we are talking about sexual abuse and assault. And I think a lot of times the arts are the way in to have those conversations because they are really difficult conversations. There's a new project I'm working on is called Yes and I am starting, the idea is that I want to start with a group of self-identified Black women, and I want to put their voices at the center. Because a lot of times when we're talking about marginalized voices, particularly voices of Black folk and then of women, a lot of times they're in supporting roles. So it's like, what happens? I feel like we know a lot. And I think coming out of this pandemic, you know, people will say we have like more than one pandemic. Like we've got, you know, it's dealing with COVID-19, and then we have the dismantling, you know, racist hierarchies that exist in our country. But I feel like we have so much knowledge, you know, in our families, in our histories, in our ancestry. We have ways to imagine forward, you know. Now we're talking about, are we going to be able to touch in class anymore? And are we going to be able to use the floor? And, you know, a lot of African diasporic forms, you don't like roll around on the floor and you don't touch each other. So I mean, there might be some, we might have, or people are like, how do you dance in masks? I'm like, there are cultures that dance with coverings on their face, so like we have some things that I think other folks might have some information about, like how do we operate in these spaces. Some cultures, some practices, some people have that information. So I'm thinking about and centering Black women's voices intergenerationally. My mom is actually, it's very interesting to have my mom in the room. You're like, yeah, there's some stuff you want to say. You're like, oh, that's my mom. You're like, oh, but she's a collaborator. Oh no. But I'm thinking about like, yeah, right. How do we, what might we make? So the question has been, who would you be and what would you do if as a Black woman, you had nothing to worry about? Mm-hmm. And not nothing to worry about as in, meh, screw everybody. But like, if you didn't have to worry about taking care of X, Y, and Z, if you didn't have to worry about how you might be seen, if you didn't have to worry about what people would think, if you didn't have to worry about translating, so make sure everybody understands you, if you didn't have to worry about taking care of your children or money, or, what would you make then? And we're starting with that as the center, and we're just going to see what happens. So I feel like it's a process of undoing a new methodology, or even an old methodology that can bring us, like in Afrofuturism, like imagine, just blow it all out the water. And this is the purpose, just, right, you see my thing, right? Hard times require furious dance, like just blow it all up. And I feel like this is the moment, right? Like, why not? Why not right now? What do we already know, like in our hearts and in our practices, about being human and being in connection with each other? And how do we share those skills so that we can move forward?
Absolutely. I love the background. I just like realized she's talking about that now. Like, tell us about that background.
Right.
And you kind of answered this, but you talked about the things that you're thinking about for the future and some of the projects that you're hoping to work on. But is there anything else, kind of maybe a little bit of share us some of your secret sauce on what you're thinking about creating for future works?
I think we've been talking about this a lot. When we got offline, we still had an end of the year dance event, right? And when we shared what we had made in the last 3 weeks, like I had made, I taught everybody No Less Black, and it was great because No Less Black was stationary. And we had been learning repertory all as part of my technique class. So it wasn't a huge jump, like it made sense. But then I taught it to every level. So we kind of alternated. So I taught the beginning and the intermediate and the advanced class. And I taught everybody the piece. And I said, when I made this piece, it was about what does it mean to be in your own skin? What does it mean to feel good in your own skin? What does it mean to be in connection and contact with yourself? And I said, so I wanted them to tape themselves. And also as part of my No Boundaries project, it's turning into a digital archive. And so I'm really interested in how can we get that kinesthetic and empathetic experience even through the screen? How is it like, how do we take advantage of the ways that it's different than what's on stage? So like when I taped it in 2018 for what I was calling the last performance, like I had the videographer actually walk around on stage so that you could get like a 360 view of the dancer. So I wanted the dancers to videotape themselves however they wanted, whatever made sense to them, whatever felt good to them. So some like socially distanced and like did it because they'd been like, with each other, and they both performed it, side by side, but at a socially distant, appropriate social distance. Some people just videotaped their feet. Some people held it in their hand and moved it. Everybody wore different costumes. And so we shared that, and we made an edit, a lovely little 2-minute edited video of all of, there were like 50 videos, so there was a lot of work. But we watched these we watched what everybody did. We watched the comp class, dancing in the fields, driving. I mean, it's like people got really creative. And I think that was one of the things we walked away with. Like there was a part of us that was feeling really sad about what we'd lost. But then watching that end of the year showing, including like the people who taught their parents or family members in their home ballet, the young people know how to do this. Like they're super creative. Like I mean, it's TikTok for for Pete's sake. Like they'll dance anywhere. Like I'm seeing all kinds of really creative and original things. And I think, we're gonna be okay. If there's anything, it's just like, it's kind of trusting like we were made for this, we were made to improvise. We were made to be flexible. We were made to like something went wrong, keep going. We're made to make new things, so I think instead of being terrified, like maybe it encourages us to speak across borders. I mentioned on Facebook, I was like, I broke my femur, my fibula, because 2020, and I tripped over my dog. So whatever. It just is just the way it's going.
Yeah.
Right. It's just the way it is. So I'm not moving around, but I've been traveling more via Zoom. I've been to Lagos, Nigeria, and I taught a workshop in Ireland.
That's awesome.
I've traveled more now than I usually do. So, I think there's really some kind of amazing things that are happening in these moments. And I hope we're able to keep these as we move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Even, with, we're not able to travel, or we're not able to always see each other, but, being able to connect, even if it is virtually, and share the creativity, being able to teach from a distance. I think as dance teachers, we see that we can reach people even if we're not in the studio, and, encouraging that really creative expression that we all know that we have with dance. I mean, that is what dance is about. I think this is kind of like the, I don't know, edge of the iceberg, or whatever you want to call it, for people opening up and really showing what they can do and showing their creativity. So I do appreciate you sharing that with us today. And I think you answered everything that I had to you without even having to ask you, which is nuts.
Awesome.
On behalf of my Two Hearts Dance and Yoga dance community, thank you so much. You inspire us to continue to share our creative juices and share our expression through dance. Where can people learn more about your upcoming projects or anything that you have coming up?
You can go to GeselMason.com, GESEL Mason, MASON.com. I am also on Facebook and Instagram, and have a Facebook page. But you'll be able to read about some of the upcoming projects on GeselMason.com for sure.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing everything that you will create. You continue to inspire us. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. This is also a gift. Your students are very, very lucky.
Oh, I'm very, very lucky to have been taught by you. So but it all trickles down.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you so much.